All right, can I begin talking?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, it's not exactly welcoming you to the Seder, but there is the preparation beforehand, and so we'll begin. We're beginning with rather late as we sing the various things, Kadesh, Urchatz, Karpas, Yachatz. We're up to Maggid, but Maggid is the essential core of what we say at the Seder, and we name the book that we use is a book of Maggid. It's a Haggadah. Now, everybody has their favorite Haggadah. Some of you may remember that when basically everybody had what was called a Maxwell House Haggadah. I don't know if they're still making Maxwell House Haggadahs that they distributed in the supermarkets. The nice thing about the Maxwell House Haggadah was, for those people who wanted to rush through the Haggadah, so they just read the Haggadah. For those people who wanted to comment on what the Haggadah meant, they weren't busy reading out of various kinds of texts. They were thinking about what they were actually saying, because they weren't overwhelmed by the commentaries. And the Haggadah, at least Haggadah that I use every year, is filled with wine stains. Rav Hutner, whom we're going to refer to later tonight, Rav Hutner used to say that a Haggadah that doesn't have wine stains is like a machzor on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur that doesn't have tear stains. It means it wasn't used. Of course, I'm not sure today how many, when I was a kid, so there were very few Shomer Shabbos in the shul, but there was a lot of crying on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur because the people knew it was very serious. Today, I think I hear less crying, but the Haggadahs, as we use them year after year, are certainly wine stained. Okay, so let's just begin with a general introduction. I'm just going to cite two Talmudic sources. First of all, that has to do with Haggadah, and that Haggadah is contained or consists of a question and a long answer. And since there are two variations on the question and the answer, we actually take care by doing both of them. So, Avadim Hayinu Lefaro, there's a question, Manishtan, and the answer, Avadim Hayinu Lefaro, right? So, the Mishnah in Psachim says, the Gemara in Psachim says that Rav Nachman said to his servant named Daru, the following question: Avda dematik le mari le cheirut, a master lets his slave, his servant, go free. V'yohiv le kaspa v'dava, and he gives him silver and gold. My boy l'neimale, right? What should the servant say to this master? The servant, who's named Daru, says to his master, Rav Nachman, well, boy la'oduye u'lishabuche. He has to thank him and to be mishabeach him, yishtabach, to praise him. At which point, Rav Nachman says, oh, okay, amalei patrosan milomer manishtana. So now we no longer have to say manishtana. And he begins right away by saying, avodim hayinu. Okay, so that we know that the avodim hayinu, which we call the Haggadah, Maggid, begins with sheva, begins with praise, okay? It begins with that he's an Eved, rather, and continues with the praise that he's free. Okay, so we're praising. We're praising. There's a problem of praising when we're talking about praising God, and that's a Gemara in Brachos on Daf Lamed Gimel Amud Beis about a certain person who was davening before the Amud, and he said, Hakel, Hagadol, Hagibor, Vahanora. Well, we're familiar with that. We say that right away in Shemon Esrei, the awesome and great God. But he went on, and he said, Hakel, Hagadol, Vahanora, V'ha'adir, V'ha'izuz, V'ha'yaru'oy, Ha'chazok, V'ha'amitz, V'ha'vadai, V'ha'nichbad. Over and over, more kinds of descriptions of God, awesome, powerful, glorious. So Rabbi Hanina, himtim lo adesayim. He waited for him to finish. Kisayim amalei samtinu lekulik sofke demarach. Lamali kulahaya. Have you done with all the praise already? You finished all the praise of your master? What is all this about? Anan, we. In other words, in the formula of Shmon Esrei, Hani Tlat Damrinon, these three, Hakel, Hagadol, Hagibor, V'Hanora, the fact that we say it, Lav Damrinu Moshe Rabbeinu Baraisa, were it not written in the Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu said this, and then the Anshe Knesses Hagdola, the men of the Great Assembly who formulated the Shmon Esrei, the Takninu, they simply, as it were, lifted it out of the Shmon Esrei, of the Torah, and put it in Tefillah. So otherwise we couldn't say anything, right? What can we say about God? Or how can we ever stop saying about God? Viat amrit kulahai viazlis? What are you saying? You're going on and on? And he gives a mashal, Lamelech basav adam, shayelo elef alfei dinarim, a melech basav adam, okay, a king, a worldly king, an earthly king. He has thousands upon thousands of dinar zahav, golden coins. And they would praise him, b'shel kesef, about the silver that he has, v'alo g'nayulo. In other words, you can't fully express the greatness of God, right? And here, the problem here is, and the Rambam describes this Gemara in Book 1, Chapter 59 of the Guide. He says, you all know this famous dictum. Would it be that all dicta were like it, right? You know what this rabbi was saying, that we can't really speak about God, okay? Were it not for the Torah saying, Hagadol, Hagibar, V'Hanora, we would not be able to say anything, right? We don't even, and the Gemara doesn't say this, but this is recognized by, we don't even pronounce the name of God. Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, we don't pronounce Yud Hey and Vav Hey. What can we really say about God? In fact, when you have a lot of positive adjectives about a person, so sometimes it's to put it mildly, sometimes it's overdone. And if there are Litvaks out there listening tonight, so then you know that in Lithuania, there was a very important thing, that when you spoke about the Vilna Gaon, you didn't add any adjectives to his name other than to say Hagaon Hasid. No more. Okay, so the more you say, if you then you're taking away, because you're not being accurate. You're not being accurate. On the other hand, this minimization that we see in Shmon Esrei has to be faced with the fact that, what do we say the first thing that we get up in the morning? Moda ani. We give thanks. And we're praising God. And if you go through Tefillah, don't you have the word Shevach? Don't you have the word Hodah over and over and over again? I started counting Shevach in Shachrit, in a regular Shachrit. I gave up after the point was made. It was well past the teens and well into 20. So what are we supposed to say about this? Will the Gemara negate saying Shevach about God? And we're starting with Shevach here. And at the same time, we're going to have a whole unit of Shevach. And on the other hand, that you can't keep saying all these things about God. And the answer, I think, is actually quite a simple answer. Okay. When you're speaking to God, when you're addressing the king, and here we have a problem because we don't have any the imagery or the reality of a king standing before us. For Americans, talk about a president. They never thought of the president as king, right? But even the notion of the glory, the august office. So we don't have it. We don't have it. But nonetheless, the imagery that Chazal were giving us of a king was one that we couldn't address directly. We couldn't address really directly with Shevach. Okay, what are we talking about when we're talking about Shevach? We're not talking to God beyond Hagadol, Hagibor, Vanora, but when we talk about God, we can use really just our own human terms. And then we can talk about God, Yishtabach Shimcha Malkeinu, and so on and so forth, right? And that difference between God in terms of the way we perceive his actions in the world, that comes up at the very end of the Guide for the Perplexed, where God says that the greatest thing that a person can know is, right, Haskel v'yodooti. Let not the wise man glory in his wisdom, the strong man in his strength, the rich man in his riches, and so on and so forth. But as the Navi Yirmiyahu says, Kim bezoti talel mitalel, a person who would self-glory, say, I accomplished something, it should glory in this, right? Haskel v'yadoa oti, that he knows me, right? That he knows, whatever that means in terms of knowing. For the Rambam, it means a philosophical understanding of the truth of God. And the Rambam says, this is what the Pasuk says. And then the Rambam goes on and ends the Guide for the Perplexed saying, Ki ani Hashem, for I God, and we would expect a philosophical ending, but the pasuk does not end philosophically, not a philosophical statement about God, but rather Ki ani Hashem oseh chesed mishpat utzedakah ba'aretz ki ve'ela chafatzti. For I God, I do chesed, I do mishpat, I do tzedakah, and all the 13 attributes are God attributes of the God way relating to the world, and I do these in the world. Ki be'ele chafatzti, and the Rambam concludes, for these do I desire, says God. God wants man to act in that way. God wants man to act with chesed, with mishpat, tzedakah, with rachum and chanun and rechapayim, and all the attributes of God that are in the 13 attributes. And that is what Shevach is about. That is what Shevach is about. And so now we speak about God with Shevach. We're speaking about God. It's not being addressed to God. It's speaking about God. What do we learn from God in the story of the Haggadah, of the Maggid? What we learn is, and that's why it's called Shevach. That's what it's all about. Now, we're stepping back right now, okay? And we're going to learn, you'll see the pages of Sfat Emet. He begins with the issue of Kol Amar B'Lesaper B'Yitziat Mitzrayim Harei Zeh Meshubach. This is Meshubach. This is praiseworthy. But I want to go now to the last page, the last 2 pages of not the Sfat Emet, yes, of the Pachad Yitzchak, and move back to Purim. So you say, wow, well, how do we get, thought we were in Pesach, we're learning Purim. But Purim is connected to Pesach. In fact, we saw it this year, in a leap year, that Purim is not in Adar Rishon. And the reason it's not in Adar Rishon is because Chazal say they want to put it in the second Adar, so it should be connected to Pesach. So there is a connection between Pesach and Purim, an intimate connection. Okay. Rav Hutner begins with the question, and this will help answer questions that we've raised already. Rav Hutner begins with the question that in all of, and particularly relevant to Pesach coming up, when everybody is talking about the shiur of how much matzah you have to eat, and they're measuring it, and they're giving you diagrams that you can put your matzah down on, and how big a cup of wine do you have to drink, and so on and so forth, and they have ways of measuring it. So he begins by saying that the mitzvah of Simcha and Yom Tov is v'samachta b'chagecha, and there are to drink wine, to eat meat. Okay, so we talk about shiurim. Okay, on line 5, the Uyan Rambam. Okay, we see line 5. Okay, Uyan Rambam Perek Vav Milchos Yom Tov Chayavin Beit Din Lahamid Shotrim B'Regalim Shehu Mesavavim Beginot V'Pardesim. The Beit Din, the court, would hire officers, police officers, on the Yom Tov. They would go around in the gardens and in the parks. V'yazhiru b'davar zeh l'chol ha'am v'lo yimshru b'yayin. To tell the people, don't drink wine. You're not supposed to drink so much wine, right? Now, on line 7, right? The Seder and Haga kazeh ef shaloshi matzi b'simchas Purim klalu klal. You don't have that on Purim. Never mentioned in halacha. Okay, there's no such halacha. Okay, so he says on line 9, the middle, Mashal lema hadavar doma. He wants to explain this. What is this like? L'chola shenit rape. Let's imagine, and I'll say this outside. Okay, the person make a kiddush in shul, right? Why is he making a kiddush? Making a kiddush because he was sick, right? So how do you judge how sick the person was? Okay, how would you know how sick the person was? I mean, let's say you don't know how you don't know how sick he was. How would you know? How would you know from the kiddush? Okay, can somebody unmute themselves and suggest a way that you would know? Okay.
Fancy it is.
What?
How fancy it is.
How fancy it is. So for example, how can you make a kiddush without, let's say, scotch? So could anybody suggest how a very, very serious illness would be treated? How many years old would the scotch be? Any connoisseurs out there?
Glenfiddich, 20 years.
Okay. The guys in the yeshiva that I raised this question to went for 25 years, but okay.
I don't know about whiskey anyway, just
Yeah, you just okay, got it. Okay, good. And on the other hand, if the guy, like he broke a finger or something like that, and he's throwing a kiddush because his finger is better, so you don't expect 25-year scotch, right? Now, however, right, that that there is one kind of case where a person might recover from, right, from an illness, right, where every illness has a certain kind of a level of how much kiddush and how much joy there is in the refuah. A person who has a lot of joy in the refuah, so it's going to be because very serious. He was very, very sick, so he shows it by, right. But let us imagine a person in line 11. We measure it by how sick it was and the value of being healed. Let's say aval on line 12. Adam shechala b'machalat hamara shchora. A person was sick with the sickness of mara shchora. What sickness is that in modern Hebrew, modern English? It's the black bile. What's the sickness of the black bile? That's what it was described in ancient medicine. It's what we call depression, the black bile. Who oses suda l'simchat havrato, and he makes a simcha for his getting. Then you can't measure it by the tzara and the Yeshua. Right? Shebesuda zu harei etzem hasimcha hi gufa hayeshua. What is the simcha? What is the very fact that the person can experience simcha? That is a salvation. The worst thing you can say to somebody who's depressed is, "Don't be depressed." It doesn't work. It just depresses him more, right? But a person who can experience simcha a little bit, right? For 10 minutes, so it's a little bit, right? But when a person can experience simcha, so every level of simcha is another joy, another step up. So you can't measure it. You can't measure it. We go on to the next page, right? You can't measure it by anything other than an evidence of simcha. And for every new state, every new level of simcha, there's another l'chaim. So you can't you raise the glass again. This is not a plan to get drunk, gentlemen and gentle ladies at a kiddush, okay? But it is indicative of the raising of the glass, which we go, I'm making the association. On Pesach, we're raising the glass 4 times. Each time. It's a process, it is a process of an ongoing simcha, moving from one stage to another stage to another stage. And that is each stage, right, is the movement forward. Each praise, each joy is the movement forward. And so we say, Kama malo tovot, right? Dayenu. But no, there's more. And when we speak about God, we have a name for God in the song after that we sing after, that begins with Aleph and ends with Taf. Adir hu, Baruch hu, and so on and so forth. We're going through it over and over and more and more. This movement forward of the Spirit is what happens in Bigadol, in large, in the statement we begin with Avadim Hayinu, and then we go on and we're telling stories, right? And it's getting more and more. And what particularly do we know becomes more and more? In this, we have 2 versions of this. Mitchila of the Avodah Zarah and Avadim Hayinu, right? And then towards the end of this, okay, we say Shelo echad bilvad amad aleinu l'chaloseinu. This is going on el shebechol dor v'dor. Omdim aleinu l'chaloteinu. V'akadosh baruch hu matzilenu. Every door. Omdim aleinu l'chaloteinu. V'akadosh baruch hu matzilenu miyodam. We don't even necessarily know. Omdim aleinu. Right? Omdim aleinu. Stalin was planning the murder of the Jews. The Jews did it, the total wiping out of the Jews. They didn't know it. We don't know. We didn't know that Lavan HaArami was planning to say Ulamadmi Lavan HaArami. Okay? And then how many miracles are made? What is going on? There are many pshatim. I'm going to suggest another pshat. What is going on by multiplying the number of miracles that were done? Right? We talk about 10 miracles. Well, what's the highest number of the miracles when you get through by the end of Maggid? How much is the highest number? Ask me, I'll be the question. What?
250.
250 miracles, right? But it's just, we're saying, another way of saying it is, we don't know how many miracles, right? And a Jew wakes up in the morning, and what's the first thing he says, even before he washes Negelwasser, right? Moda ani lefanecha, shechzarta bi nishmati b'chemla rabu emunatecha. I didn't, like I say to guys, imagine I say to a guy in the yeshiva, look, I want you to call your parents tomorrow morning, or call your parents and say, I want to tell you what a incredible religious experience I had this morning. Mamish, it was, what happened? I woke up and I realized I was in the presence of God. I'm alive. What's going to happen? Okay? What will happen is this. Their parents will get on a plane and wine and dine this young boy for 3 or 4 days in places where normalcy can return to him by checking into the King David, maybe taking him Teilat for a week, right? What is it, right? So, The notion of modeh ani, of thanks, of recognizing, of bimishabeach, and here we come to the next part, right? That kol amarbe besipur yitzias mitzrayim harezeh mishubach. This is praiseworthy. Well, what do you mean? I've said a praiseworthy thing. Harezeh mishubach. This is a praiseworthy thing to say. Kol amarbe besipur yitzias mitzrayim. It's a praiseworthy thing to do. Okay? I'd love to see the Maxwell House Haggadah. Okay? I'm just straight with the English translation. That it is a praiseworthy thing to do. I would say that's probably the translation. This is a praiseworthy thing, right? Let's take a look now back to the page 1. Okay? What does the Sfat Emet say about this? Kol hamarbe, okay, we're going to look now at 3 Sfat Emeses. I hope we get through them. 3 Sfat Emeses. The Sfat Emes is now about 38 or 39 years old. Okay, he became a Rebbe very early in life, in the year 50. The equivalent of 1871 or 72. And he keeps referring, as common with people who are familiar with Sfat Emet knows, he keeps referring year after year until the year 1905. He keeps writing down his sort of like notes about what he's saying on Shabbos or on Yom Tov, very short notes. And he often repeats the same issue. But if you read the Sfat Emet carefully, you see the Sfat Emet never repeats. It's always different in some way, sometimes in a major way and sometimes in a minor way. And sometimes he changes his mind entirely. Okay? But the Kol Hamarbe, okay, you see the first Sfas Emes. Kol Hamarbe, this is in the year, so we'll say it's in the year 1879. It is. Kol Hamarbe l'sapir b'tziat Mitzrayim hareze meshubach. Meshubach mamish. Mamish meshubach. Right? Mamish, right? It's not an honorific. It's not just stam, right? Ki yetziat Mitzrayim ein lo sof. Because why? Hamarbe is meshubach. Why? Because you can't make a simple statement about Yetziat Mitzrayim for a very simple reason. It is ein lo sof, right? It has no end. Ukamosha asha amru ilu lo hotzi hare anu vanenu. Going out of Egypt meant going out of an eternal servitude. Right? Kimokain, v'kol shekain, mida tova shi ha'geula misham, b'vaday nogea l'darei darot. Redemption certainly is ein lo sof. It affects all future generation. Uktiv hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lochem l'lokim. Right? I took you out of Egypt to be for you a God. And therefore, on line 3, the middle of line 3, to the degree that we stir ourselves up, that we become part and parcel of the Geula of Mitzrayim, that we see ourselves in what could have been if we had stayed in that state, al yedei hasipur, that this story is a transformatory story. Kamo kain zochin lahamshich malchut shamayim aleinu. Aleinu. Okay? Gentlemen and ladies, did you hear that aleinu? It's not this is meshubach, right? It is mishabeach hare ani meshubach. I have been transformed to the degree that I can understand the meaning of freedom, of what this freedom is for. This is not a story about X. It is a story about me. When I internalize the meaning of freedom, no small matter, right? We're used to freedom, so we take it for granted. No small matter. Al yedei hasipur kamokein zochin lahamshich malchut shamayim aleinu. We can get up in the morning, right? And every morning, morning after morning, taking nothing for granted, we can say, Moda ani lefanecha shechzarta bi nishmasi. The ein lozeh shiur. There is no measure. Harezeh meshubach. This is a transformation in the person. The afilu kulanu chachamim. Even if we are all very big scholars, wise, right? Mikol makom, nonetheless, al yedei asipur nigalim od mitachat yad hayetzer hara. We also need redemption from all kinds of negative forces. There are the negative forces of the outside, there is the environment, and there are negative forces inside. There's the outside man as the object. He's the object of life which acts on him, and he is also the subject of life. That's what freedom means. That's what free will means. That I can transform myself, umit alim biyoter, and I can rise up, ad shamru chazal, lahavi limot yemot hamashiach, that even Even in Yemot HaMashiach will say this. Or another way of saying this, as the Radomsker says, call, right, that Lahavi Limos HaMashiach, right, that by living this kind of a life, that will bring Yemot HaMashiach, right? Shal Yedei Sipur Yetziat Mishrayim B'chol Shana V'Shanani Tosef Hadat. Dat. What is dat? In Hebrew, dat has two meanings. Okay, one meaning, obvious. I think I can safely say everybody knows. Means knowledge, intellect. But dat also means in Hebrew the will. In biblical Hebrew, it means will. There's that fantastic Ramban at the beginning of the Chumash. Not a Ramban that I ever understood. Okay. That Eitz Hadat Tov V'Ra is not the tree of knowledge of good or evil, it's the tree of the will for good or evil. So the problem, of course, you understand, I'm going off on a minor tangent, is if they got the will for good or evil, then they didn't have free will before, they only got a will by eating, so how can they be held accountable? If anybody can answer that question, okay, in the old days when I taught in Yeshivat Hamivtar, the reward was a very large Cadbury bar. Sha'al Yedei Sipur Yetziat Mishrayim B'chol Shana V'Shana Nitosef Hadat Ad Sha'al Yedei Zeh Yizku L'Biat Mashiach V'oz Yitkayem Liot Lochem L'Elokim. So there is a meshubach that the Sfat Emet is emphasizing, and the key word is meshubach mamish. The person is transformed, right? And the emphasis that he says, they're transformed through what? On the next to the last line, Kol Shana V'Shana, at the end of the line, Nitosef Hadat. Back to Eitz Hadat. But Nitosef Hadat, my understanding, my being able to distinguish between truth and falsehood according to the Rambam, or between good and evil according to the Ramban, whatever we mean by the capacity of that, person will merit Biat Mashiach, right? And once you're in that mode, once you're there, he ends, Kayem liot lachem lelokim. What is lachem? What is the emphasis here? Why have, at least in my text here, I've underlined lachem, right? Because lachem lelokim means the ability not to say, God is the God of the world, all this kind of thing, right? That it's easier. I heard once from Rabbi Tzipperstein, Olav Shalom, that when we blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah, so there's shofros of Malchios. And what is Malchios? Kingdom, coronation, right? And it says, blow the shofar kadei shetamlichuni aleichem, that I accept God as my king. And Rav Tzipperstein said, it's easy to proclaim God of the king of myriads and myriads and millions and billions of worlds, distant, right? You get it right? The challenge for a human being is to say that God is alai, shetamlichuni aleichem, that God is my king, right? And that's what the Rebbe is saying, right? That when you can be mamlich, okay, and that comes through understanding what I call internalized knowledge that is transformative. Okay, that's Malchut Shemayim, right? Now the Rebbe, we're going on from Pesach 1879 to Pesach 1880. Okay, and we go down to the next page. We've got to go to the next page, right? Okay, in which, as part of that Torah, he goes the following thing. Everybody see Kol Hamar Belasapri B'Tzriyat Mitzrayim Harezem Meshubach. He's talking about the same thing. And he says the following thing. Hu al Kol Hayomim L'man Tizkor. All the days that you have to remember this. Lachein, in other words, it's not just about Pesach. Kol Hamar Belasapri B'Tzriyat Mitzrayim Harezem Meshubach is not just the story of Pesach on Seder night. Hu al Kol Hayomim Kemoshe Kasuv L'man Tizkor, right? Kol Yemei Chayecha, right? Not all your Pesachs, but all your 120 years times, well, you do the math. Lochein Zochrim Yetziat Mitzrayim B'chol Yom. That's why we remember Yetziat Mitzrayim every day. We daven, we're remembering Yetziat Mitzrayim. Vayedei Hasipur, by telling the story, okay, by telling the story, mit orer tzat geula bichlal uprat. What we're doing is experiencing something of redemption, kol nefesh miYisrael. And this is the statement. He goes on, harei zeh meshubach. What the Haggadah says, harei zeh meshubach, eino simin shehu meshubach. It's not just a sign that he's a worthy person. It is rak shenase meshubach al yedei hasipur. Through the story, okay? Ukemoshe haya yimtziat mitzrayim hachana lekabalat haTorah vekabalat malchut shamayim. But what is Yetziat Mitzrayim? So Yetziat Mitzrayim was not the end. Yetziat Mitzrayim is preparation for receiving the Torah. And receiving the Torah begins with the Aseret HaDibrot begins with what? Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Asher hotzaticha me'eretz Mitzrayim. And that is Kabbalat Malchut Shamayim. That's what Malchut Shamayim. We're not getting into the philosophical question how you can be commanded about it, right? But at least the simplest level of the command is that you and I better think about what the Sfat Emet is saying, because it is Anochi Hashem Elokecha, and that's what Yetziat Mitzrayim was all about. It's the beginning of a process. It's a beginning of a process. Pesach, okay. Yetziat Mitzrayim is the beginning of a process even now to be ready on Shavuos night to say Shavuos in the morning, night, not to be asleep, but to be able to be awake enough when you hear Anochi Hashem Elokecha. And here I can't help but going off on a tangent. What did the Jews hear? So a lot of people know that they heard the first two dibrot, Anochi Hashem Elokecha no Yelecha, and then they couldn't take the awesomeness of it, so Moshe had to tell them what God was saying. The Rimanover Rebbe, the first Rimanover Rebbe, okay, said that all they heard, he cut it down. No, they didn't hear the first dibrot. He said all they heard was the sound of the first letter. Are you hearing me? Could somebody speak up and say the first letter of Anochi Hashem Elokecha? Say it. Just pronounce the letter. No. Thank you very much, whoever said it. Aleph doesn't have a sound. It's soundless. The Aleph doesn't have a sound. It's the sound of silence. Now, I know some of you are thinking, this guy has been listening to Paul Simon too much, right? No, right? Paul Simon, maybe, I'm not saying this, I'd have to speak to him and ask him, maybe he figured it out by reading in Malachim when Eliyahu Hanavi runs to Har Sinai, and God, he said, what are you doing here, right? Like God, how are you hiding, you know? And there's a great wind that passes, and God is not in the wind, and a great thunder and a great noise, and God is not in all these, right? And then there is a kol demama daka, which King James translates beautifully, a still, small voice. It's beautiful as English poetry, but it's not a translation. Kol is a sound. What is demama? What is demama? Amodom! What's demama? Silence. It's the sound of silence. But what kind of silence? Daka. Fine silence. What I call desert silence. Desert silence. We used to go on Tiyulim in the Yeshivat Hamivtar, and take them in Mitzpeh Ramon, and take them up on that hill, and tell guys, okay, it's night, you can see actually stars, like there's no lighting around, you can see stars. Okay, you're all here. I want you to keep quiet for 1 minute. Let's listen to the silence of the stars, right? Let's listen to silence. Okay, and I knew what was going to happen, so I watched. It was usually around 22 seconds that a whisper began. Some guy couldn't control it, and another guy couldn't. We can't deal with it. To listen to the sound of silence, called the mamadaka, right? And that's what we're talking about here, right? It's an experience. It is listening beyond listening. Okay? That's what the Rimanover meant. The Rimanover meant what they really experienced, the presence of God. And the presence of God is even harder to experience in a world that is too much with us, in which there is too much noise all the time. But in that moment of silence, in that moment in which the call of God is heard, right? There is what the hachana lekabel haTorah in Yetziat Mitzrayim, the kabbalat, and then the end of going out of Mitzrayim was kabbalat malchut shamayim. Okay, so where do we hear this sound? We hear this sound. What we have is the Torah, right? And then he says something fabulous, right? Fabulous. When I say fabulous, it can't be, there's what's happening in Bnei Brak on this night. We're Pesach night. Back then, the Chachamim are talking all, and they don't say Kriyat Shema. They have to be stopped by their, right? And that sounds like they didn't even eat matzah or anything. They're saying it all night, right? What are they doing? So he says, the Sfat Emet says on the fourth line that we're on, Ve'eno rachok lomar. You see that in the middle of the line at the period? Ki masa b'bnei Brak. The story in Bnei Brak, and this is going to upset everybody, right? The Sfat Emet says it could be that it was Hayo balayla acheret shayu misapri mota alayla. It didn't take place on Pesach. Has anybody heard this before? No. When I say I should say, I never heard it till I saw this Sfat Emet, right? And they were talking about Yetziat Mitzrayim at Ora Boker. What's his reason for saying that? Because how could you say, right, that they hadn't yet eaten matzah, maror, and they hadn't had the 4 kosos and all the mitzvos. They were misaprim b'Yetziat Mitzrayim kol osa leila, right? And what? Right? So he says, now what is he saying? There is a beginning of a process. There's a beginning of process of mishubach. Mishubach is a person who I'm underlining in my text. You can see I underline that he's added something here. Not just this business about Bnei Brak, that's a side issue, okay? That is, Yetziat Mitzrayim is hachana lekabbalat Torah, right? What is being done and what is going on in this story of telling the story is it's preparing us. When we're speaking tonight, we're speaking tonight. But when we're speaking on the Seder night, We're preparing for Kabbalah Satorah, Kabbalah Ol Malchut Shamayim. It's there, the thing that has been, we're not simply talking about Nitosef Hadat. Our understanding is more. But we understand that we don't understand, and we have to prepare ourselves to understand. You have to come into an attitude of wanting to do something. It doesn't just happen, right? It doesn't just happen. Step 1879, okay? And then we're in the last year. I'm sorry, that was 1880, the second one we did. Did I say 70? The first one was 79, 1880. Now we're Pesach, 1881, okay? And he's talking about the same thing, okay? Okay, the last one, okay? Be'inyan hamar b'lesapir b'tziat Mitzrayim. See, I'm sorry I went on a tangent, but I had a much longer tangent that just occurred to me now. But, you know, here I'm under the, not the, the sphera, but the time, right? Okay, but we're in 1881. The Inyan Amar b'lesapir b'tziat Mitzrayim harei meshubach. Katvu hamefarshim ki b'chol makom asu laharba b'shvicha shel makom. You're not allowed to say the shevach of makom. Who can speak about God? Who can tell his whole gevura? In other words, the Sfat Emet is bringing to bear the Gemara that we started with in Brachot. You can't just keep going endlessly, l'saper. So it's meshubach, harezem meshubach, right? Ach b'yetziat Mitzrayim, it is meshubach. Talking about v'nira tam, the reason is ki lami shenasa lo hanes v'chein b'makom u'vizman shel hanes, for the person who experienced the nes, and in the place, right? And in the time of the nes, mutarim u'muchuyavim lahalel l'shabeach, right? So we have to recreate the nes, right? Ki'ilu, we are trying to recreate the nes to understand that something incredible is happening and to experience that, right? And through that, our nature of understanding changes radically, okay? Ulefisha amarnu ve'ila hotzi HaKadosh Baruch Hu et avoteinu harei anu mishubadim. Were we not taken out, we would be still slaves. Memela nasa lanu hanes. If we've started that process, so then we, it's real. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? We're under stress. We're in Egypt, right? When Rabbi Nachman of Breslov would tell stories, there were times, it's described, there were times, and he was the great storyteller, the greatest Jewish storyteller, obviously before Kafka, okay? And there were times that he would burst out saying, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Right? I don't think Rabbi Nachman was an actor. I think he was in the story. Are we in the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim? So if we are in the story, then Besof Haggadah, the last, then we're experiencing the nes. The Mela Nasalonu Amnes. Lachein Hamar B'Lesaper has been transformed because he's Meshubach. V'chein Besof Haggadah Sha'omrim V'Otanu Hotzi Lefichach Anachim Chayovim Lahodot Lahalel, and so on and so forth. So there is a movement of variations. Let's say variations on a theme, right? That the Sfat Emet is moving with year by year, variations of the theme. And here it's with the experience that I have. Now, that it should not be said that if somebody were to say, I'd like, for example, I'd like to teach at the Seder. I'd like to teach that which, just in case there are people there, say I'd like to teach what Dovid Ebner, what Rabbi Ebner said now. People will say, we're not waiting till morning, and we're not waiting for you to finish. Enough's enough. 2 minutes, that's all you get, right? So in a world in which, I left a little time, okay, to share with you my favorite. Some of my children know these. The Halayla Hazem Maror, okay. So Halayla Hazem Maror, okay. So this Haggadah I'm using quotes the Sfat Emet, who's quoting his grandfather, the first Rebbe of Gur. He said that the reason for eating maror, Shemar Shahaya Mar Lohem Hayaktzat Geula, that the redemption began when they realized that it was bitter, that life was bitter. Not just take it as it is, that it doesn't have to be that way. Vayamas Kamoshikasu Vayamas Melech Mitzrayim Vayeonchu. The king of Egypt died, and they groaned, because before that they were not allowed to groan, or they didn't realize that they should groan. Right? This Torah of the Chidush Arim, it's also related to the Kotzker. This Torah, I'm sure that many people here who are at the shiur have read, or it was a seminal moment in their life when they read The Jews of Silence by Elie Wiesel. And in that book he quotes that, and that's what he says, that after the 6-day war, the Jews were in Russia, they were allowed to groan. That was the beginning of freedom. That was the beginning of the fall and the beginning of the redemption for the Jews of Russia. Quotes this. Ulekach ba hagula. The meaning of the burdens of Egypt. What are the Sivlot Mitzrayim? Shema shahayi lo hayu yecholim l'sovlam. The fact that they said, this doesn't have to be this way. We can't bear this. They were still slaves and they were still working hard, right? But but the bearing of it, right? That Mitzrayim was not part of normal life. I once heard from Rav Amital, who said, Chamushim alu b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim, when they went out of Mitzrayim. So you know that Rashi says that only 1 out of 5 went out of Mitzrayim, right? So but it's a medrash, only 1 out of 5. The others didn't want to leave or whatever, so they died in it. But there's a medrash that says 1 out of 50, and another medrash says 1 out of 500, and another medrash says 1 out of 5,000. Multiply that, and you see that there were pyramids of Jews all over Egypt because they had no room for them to stand. So Rav Amital said, no, all of the Jews went out of Mitzrayim, but only 1 out of 5, or maybe 1 out of 500, went up from Mitzrayim. The rest of them took Mitzrayim with them, right? Took Mitzrayim with them. And that notion that, that Mitzrayim is not normal, or the values of Mitzrayim is not normal, is what freedom is, right? It's not merely freedom from, it's freedom for. Okay. Now, let me go on and give you another short Torah, very short Torah. Kol yemei chayecha lahavi limos hamashiach. Right? Which means that you say Kriyat Shema, you're going to say Kriyat Shema even in the time of Mashiach. where you're going to talk about Yetziat Mitzrayim even in the time of Mashiach. Okay? That's what the pshat is. The Radomsky Rebbe says, Kol Yemei Chayecha, all the days of your life. Tzorich lalechet b'machshava zu, right? A person should be going, right? Kol Yemei Chayecha should be waiting for Mashiach. Sheyizke lirot Yemei Mashiach, right? Now, is that pshat? Is that pshat? It's not pshat. Not pshat in this drasha. Absolutely not pshat. Is it pshat in life? And if so, could somebody volunteer a reason that they know that it's pshat in life as a Jew? Nobody's saying anything? Yes. Oh, I'm unmuted, so I can say. Okay. How do we know it, right? Because, like I sometimes speak to guys after they've had a very heartfelt singing of Ani Mamin. V'af al pi sheyitmameh yaim kol ze achat yalo achat, which is out of the 13 principles of faith. It's not the Arabic, so it's not the Rambam's translation. B'chol yom sheyavo, af al pi sheyitmameh, right? B'chol yom sheyavo, right? When is it? We want Mashiach now, right? So there is a reason that the Rebbe, I just want a disclaimer, I'm not a Lubavitcher Chassid, but there's a reason that the Rebbe say that you have to say we want Mashiach now, because it doesn't mean I want him later in the day. It means now. And that's Kol Yemei Chayecha, all the days of your life, for Lahavi Limosa Mashiach. And one last Torah. See, this won't take a long time to say. I actually said something that you can say for a minute at the Seder, but okay. Okay, we're saying in Haggadah, Avram was told by God, right? There'll be, and this is the story of you're going to be in Egypt, there'll be, and then okay? So, Hivticho HaKadosh Baruch Hu LaAvram. This is I use the word lightly because I don't like to use the word. This little Torah is awesome. Okay? There I said it. Right? Hivticho HaKadosh Baruch Hu LaAvram. God promised Avram, Ki be'eretz lo lohem, when they are in a country that is not theirs, that will always be Yiyeh Zaro Gerim. They will always remain Gerim, sojourners, strangers. Gerim be'eretz lo lohem lo yitazrechu. They will not become, what is yitazrechu? What is that? It's the reflexive of a noun, right? It means they will not be citizens. They will not take out a passport. V'lo yitbolelu be'umot, and they will not assimilate. Right? So we have to end with a tefillah that.
That's so true.
Yes, we have to end with a tefillah, right? That it should be. Everybody should wake up, right, to this. Everybody should learn this on this last Torah, if nothing else. They should not learn it, they should internalize it, right? Internalize it, right? Okay, people, okay, I saw some of you, I see all the names, okay? You should have a Chag Kosher V'Sameach, and it should be a Chag Kosher V'Sameach. It should be Simcha, okay? And the whole Yom Sheyavo, you wake up in the morning and you say Modani, right? And you look at you look at the news right away to see if something, it will happen. Im Yirtzeh Hashem, it will happen. Okay. Be well, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.